Scrum Masters Elite _UK, a place where we look failure straight in the eye. Analyze it without avoidance, and learn patience with the process of rebuilding. Subscribe to the channel to gain a deeper, fairer understanding of rugby. Every time I sit down to analyze a heavy defeat, I have to remind myself to slow my breathing, not to search for excuses, and not to fuel more anger, but to face reality head-on. Wales' 48-7 loss to England on the opening day of the Six Nations was not merely a defeat on the scoreboard. For me, it was a hard collision with belief, with expectations, and more deeply, with how we, rugby lovers, followers of this national team, understand the process of building a collective, generational transition, and the true limits of courage when confronting a clearly superior opponent. I did not watch that match with pessimism. On the contrary, before kickoff there was still a very Welsh sense of hope in me, that despite the difficulties, despite the inexperience of the squad, the fighting spirit and resilience that define Welsh rugby would prevent a collapse. But from the first half, as England completely dominated possession, space, and tempo, I understood this would be a very long evening, not only for the players at the Allianz Stadium, but also for those of us watching from our screens.
What troubled me most was not England's repeated scoring, but the feeling that Wales barely had a chance to breathe. It was a sense of being suffocated, forced into constant defense, stripped of any tactical intent from the very opening minutes. Watching Louis Rees-Zammit, one of the brightest hopes in attack, almost completely neutralized in the first half, I saw a form of systemic helplessness. Not because he lacks talent, but because the team failed to create a platform for individuals to shine. A kick charged down, a break made without adequate support and immediately punished, cruel proof that at this level, even the smallest deviation can cause everything to collapse. On the opposite wing, Ellis Mee gave me much to think about. His repeated isolation and exposure by England were not necessarily signs of individual weakness, but rather of a defensive structure too fragile to protect a young winger. When Henry Arundel completed his hat-trick in that channel, I did not see an individual failure. I saw a collective unable to shield its own vulnerabilities. In elite rugby, defense is never a one-man story. Eddie James and Ben Thomas in midfield highlighted the developmental gap between the two teams. The effort was there, the spirit unquestionable, but against a well-organized England, intelligent in movement and sharp in decision-making, even the smallest spaces became fatal weaknesses. Ben Thomas's misplaced pass that led directly to an English try is a moment I believe he himself will remember for a long time. Not to punish himself, but to understand that the role of a playmaking centre demands near-perfect precision, especially under sustained pressure. Josh Adams was one of the few rare bright spots in attack. His near-total absence from the ball in the first half spoke volumes about England's control, yet when an opportunity finally came in the second half, he took it. That left me with mixed feelings of consolation and regret. Consolation because Wales still have players who can seize moments, regret because those moments were so few. At fly half, Dan Edwards stirred very mixed emotions in me. I respect his courage, his willingness to step up defensively and confront pressure head-on. The accurate kick that led to Adams' try was a beautiful moment, a rare cheer for Welsh supporters. But rugby is not a sport of isolated moments. When the entire system is overpowered, even the bravest young player struggles to change the course of a match. If I had to name the player who gave me the greatest sense of reassurance, it would be Thomas Williams. He played with clear awareness of his team's situation, kicking long and hard, trying to disrupt England's rhythm, occasionally probing the fringes himself. Yet even Wales' standout performer could not escape limitations. Indiscipline undermined rare efforts to create momentum. To me, Thomas Williams embodies present-day Wales. Quality and ideas are there, but not yet the consistency or control to turn those ideas into results. Looking at the back row, I felt more reflection than disappointment. Aaron Wainwright, Josh McLeod, and Alex Mann each brought energy, work rate, and fighting spirit. Wainwright was relentless with ball in hand, contributing on both sides of the ball, a reminder that Wales still have players capable of operating at high intensity. McLeod, on his Six Nations debut, showed why he deserved the opportunity, even if his impact was less pronounced than at club level. Alex Mann was lively and combative, even cunning enough to frustrate opponents and earn a penalty. Yet once again, all of these individual efforts were swallowed by England's systemic superiority. In the second row, Adam Beard and Davith Jenkins conveyed resilience. Jenkins in particular impressed with tireless tackling and reliable line-out work. He played until the final minutes as if the score was still level. To me, that is deeply Welsh, never giving up, even when the situation is beyond control. Archie Griffin, Nicky Smith, and especially Captain Dewey Lake made me think more about the weight of roles and expectations. Usually dependable, Lake endured a forgettable first half, ineffective line-outs, a yellow card, and a costly handling error. When he returned to the field in silence, I did not see individual disappointment, I saw the burden of the captain's armband during an exceptionally difficult period. The replacements helped Wales slow England's scoring in the second half, one of the few positives the coaching staff can cling to. But England's 2 late tries served as a final statement. This match had been decided very early, with no moment that truly shifted the balance. When the final whistle blew, I didn't switch off the screen immediately. I sat there, thinking about the sense of humiliation many supporters were surely feeling. Then I asked myself, what purpose does humiliation serve, if it only breeds bitterness and total rejection? For me, the biggest lesson from this defeat lies not in the scoreline, but in accepting reality. Wales are in the midst of a painful transition. The gap to top teams like England cannot be closed by spirit or courage alone. The lesson for me, as a follower and lover of rugby, is to learn patience, patience with a new generation learning to compete at the highest level, patience with inevitable mistakes, and patience with the slow process of rebuilding from the foundations. The lesson for supporters is to distinguish between constructive criticism and blind anger. The players on that field did not lack effort, they lacked experience, cohesion, and a system strong enough to protect them.
More broadly, this match reminds us of a simple truth: courage is necessary, but it cannot replace preparation, structure, or time. No one matures simply by trying harder in a single difficult moment. True development demands long-term investment, acceptance of failure, and the ability to learn from it without losing faith. 48-7 is a brutal scoreline, but if we stop at shame alone, we miss its deeper meaning. For me, it is a painful but necessary milestone, a mirror reflecting Wales' current position with honesty. Only by daring to look directly into that mirror, without avoidance or false optimism, can the long and uneven road ahead begin to come into clearer focus. This defeat draws a clear line between constructive criticism and blind rage. The players on the field that day did not lack effort or fighting spirit. What they lacked was experience, cohesion, and a system strong enough to support them under immense pressure. Venting anger at individuals, especially young players, only makes the rebuilding process heavier. Support does not mean blind protection, but failure should not be turned into a witch hunt. From a wider perspective, the match reminds us that courage is essential, but it cannot substitute for preparation, tactical structure, and squad depth. No individual can carry an inferior system alone. As in life, no one grows simply by trying harder in a single crisis. Real progress requires time, serious investment, and the courage to face failure without losing belief. 48-7 is a bitter scoreline. But if we pause, reflect, and learn from it, it can become a necessary milestone, not to deny the past, but to begin again in a more realistic and sustainable way for the future of Wales.
We close with honesty and patience. Failure is a mirror for learning. Thank you to our audience for listening. Join Scrum Masters Elite _UK as we continue this journey in future videos.